Yes, we are now live on Facebook, so we can go ahead.
Okay. Hello, welcome everyone, and thank you for being with us today. My name is Raya Kalinova. I'm Executive Vice President and CEO of the European Jewish Congress, the representative umbrella organization federating over 14 national Jewish communities across Europe, many of which have joined us today. It is a big pleasure to welcome you today under the auspices of the European Parliament Working Group Against Antisemitism for an important conversation about the latest developments in the fight against antisemitism, focusing on online hate speech, conspiracy theories, and radicalization. The worrying spread of conspiracy theories, the rampant hate and disinformation online are driving factors of anti-Semitic violence in the physical world. And those are the trends which aggravated in the context of the current pandemic. Today is a very special day for the fight against anti-Semitism, as just by chance, it's the same day the European Council will be voting on an important declaration to mainstream the fight against anti-Semitism across policy areas. In previous occasions, including in our previous webinar of the working group, we brought these concerns to the attention of the German presidency of the Council. And we are very hopeful that today's declaration will be another great success in the important mission. We are grateful for the participation of all our speakers today. So please allow me to introduce very shortly them to you. We are honored to have with us today Dr. Ariel Musikant, Vice President of the European Jewish Congress, who will present a Jewish perspective to our discussion. Mr. Michael O'Flaherty, Director of the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights. Ms. Christina Stump, Head of Unit of the Media Convergence and Social Media in Directorate General for Communications, for the Communications Network, Content and Technology of the European Commission. And Mr. Ahmad Mansour, author, psychologist, and CEO of the Mansour Initiative for Democracy Promotion and Prevention of Extremism. And we are extremely grateful to MEP Nicola Baer, Vice President of the European Parliament and Chair of the Working Group Against Antisemitism, and to MEP Otmar Karas, also Vice President of the European Parliament and Vice Chair of the Working Group, for hosting these important discussions. Today's panel will be moderated by our EGC Campaigns and Communications Officer, Maria Bagdasarova, and our EGC Policy Director, Yohanan Seinav. Before giving the floor to Vice President Baer for her opening remarks, I would like to inform you that simultaneous German-English translation is available for our panelists and those who are connected to us via Zoom. So please choose your preferred language using the relevant button at the bottom of the screen. Nicola Baer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raya. I'm very delighted, as you are, to welcome you all today. And maybe I just give a brief introduction to the topic we will deal today with, and then introduce you to each other. At the latest, and I really say at the latest, since the outbreak of COVID-19 and since our life takes place most of the time in front of a screen, so like today, as it's not possible to do this event in presence, it becomes obvious how our digital world challenges us. Conspiracy theories are everywhere. Facebook, WhatsApp, and Telegram groups, but also very prominent figures. I mean, I'm especially thinking on Donald Trump, very bluntly spread fake news without any barriers and bad conscience. So disinformation and conspiracy theories are on the rise, but what next? What are the consequences? If we look back and take, for example, the horrible terrorist attack in Halle, we can see where anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and disinformations can lead to. As it concerns prevention, I think we need to begin in school at a very young age to give kids the tool to defend themselves against an avalanche of news and manipulation, and to train their teachers and educators to support them hereby. We have to fight for education not only inside the classroom, but also outside in museums, during exchanges, and also with visits to memorials like concentration camps. But also beside this micro level, we have to think about whole countries, regimes like Iran that use the power of disinformation and incitement to lead a war, a digital war. This is why we need to dismantle every mechanism of this kind. We need a quality media ecosystem where we protect real freedom of expression and opinion, but fight against pure insult. Independent media without disinformation and the spread of hatred means also to be democratic and to preserve deep-rooted European values. So a very warm welcome to Mr. Musikant. I'm very happy to see you and to work with you as a Vice President and representative of European Jewish Committee once again. I'm looking forward to listen to the issues and expectation of the Jewish communities, and I very much hope that such a diverse panel composed of so many wonderful guests will hopefully answer some of your pressing questions. This is also why I'm very delighted to welcome Mr. Mansour among us, a German psychologist who is involved in the fight against radicalization since years and has also advised several German federal ministries on their strategies to tackle radicalization and to foster prevention. Of course, it is even more interesting to hear your perspective, as I assume it to be very authentic. As Arab Israeli, you might grow up with a maybe long outdated dichotomy between Arabs and Jews. What is your impression today as a German living in the European society, also when you compare it to your memories of your past? Our guest, Mr. Flaherty, also can tell us more about the state of European societies, as he and his team just recently published the Fundamental Rights Agency report on anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, I know that there is no good outlook, as anti-Semitism is on the rise, especially due to COVID-19 and all these nasty conspiracy theories it brought with it. I'm very keen to hear more about the latest developments in Europe and in its member states, especially how they handle their data when it comes to anti-Semitism. Lately, we will really dive into the field with Mrs. Stamp, who just very recently took over the job from Mr. Cesarini as a head of the Media Convergence and Social Media Unit in DG Connect. I hope Mrs. Stamp will tell us more about the tools which were her unit tackles disinformation, the spread of hate speech and conspiracy myths. I'm looking forward to hear examples from your work and also but the role the fighting against anti-Semitism plays here. So, and last but not least, I wanted to thank and pass over to Maria and Johannen, who switched in as unfortunately Ariella cannot be with us today, and you took over very spontaneously. So thank you also for this, and you will moderate this event today. I'm sure that this will be an interesting exchange from different point of views and angles, and we will give an enriching conclusion at the end. This conclusion, and there I come to my really esteemed Vice President colleague, Mr. Karras, will be drawn by Vice President Karras, and I'm delighted to work with him and all of you, and we will raise here and there some questions in the discussion. So for everybody, thanks for being with us, and now have a nice event. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Ms. Baer, for your important points. You and Vice President Karras also welcome to intervene at any moment of our conversation today in order to raise any questions you might have for our panelists. I think it may be useful to begin by understanding the reality on the ground from the standpoint of the Jewish community. Allow me to introduce my dear friend, Dr. Ariel Musikant, Vice President of the European Jewish Congress, who has been actively involved not only in Jewish life in Vienna and Austria, but also internationally, fighting together with us against anti-Semitism and advocating for preserving Jewish life and tradition all over Europe. And he's doing this for almost 50 years. He also served as the president of the Jewish community of Vienna for 14 years. Today, this community is a thriving example to the rest of Europe and enjoys excellent cooperation with the Austrian authorities. Ariel, Jewish communities have been affected by the ongoing pandemic, not only due to the devastating impact of the disease, but also due to the spread of hate speech, conspiracy theories, and disinformation. How do these phenomena affect Jewish communities? And how does it translate in the physical world? And what do Jewish community expect from governments and the European Union? Ariel, thank you. The floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, there was a study published today which shows that, for example, the death rate in Jewish communities in Europe, especially in Western Europe, is higher than the average death and mortality. Why so? Well, Jews live closer together, especially Orthodox and Haredi Jews, but also the Bukharian community, wherever it exists. And we had, unfortunately, much more people sick and dying than the average. But on top of that, we had the terrorists and the physical attacks. The attack in Vienna, which caused 4 deaths and 27 injured, happened exactly in front of the major synagogue and in front of the community center. And there was a second physical attack in Vienna on a rabbi last week. And then you have the ongoing increase of anti-Semitic statements and conspiracy theories, especially in social medias. And all this together is a cocktail which for the Jewish soul of European Jewish people is really hard to swallow. Yes, there are differences between East and West. There's differences if you speak in Hungary or Poland, or if you speak to France and Austria. But generally speaking, the psychological pressure on Jewish people is enormous. It's already enormous on the non-Jews, but all this together, the psychological situation of Jewish people is not good. Average people are afraid, average people are angry, average people after 10 months of lockdown have problems. But when you then hear all these conspiracy theories, when you have demonstrations of groups who are fighting lockdowns, but also shout anti-Semitic slogans in the street, and we had this in Germany, we had this in Austria, for example, it really hurts and it makes us feel uncomfortable. Now, what can politicians do? I think what is mostly needed at this moment is sympathy, empathy. The people need to feel that the Jewish communities are not left alone. I think a quick remedy against what's happening in the internet and conspiracy theory is impossible. But what the Jewish people would need now is not just speeches, but also certain acts of sympathy, certain acts of making clear that the basic of this pandemic has nothing to do with Jews, has nothing to do with our existing here. And I've been writing an article and then I stopped doing so. Just as a little joke, the head scientist of Pfizer, Michael Dolstein, is Jewish. The CEO of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, is a Jew from Thessaloniki. The chief medical officer of Moderna is an Israeli immigrant named Tal Zaks. And one of the two professors who developed RNA vaccine possibilities was Professor Drew Weissman from the Weizmann Institute. Now, I stopped writing this because my wife, when she saw what I was writing, said, "Stop that nonsense. If you write this, you'll create more anti-Semites." So I can only tell you emotionally, I think what the Jewish communities need now is people like the members of the parliament and others like you, Mrs. Baer, and Dr. Karas and others, to come out and just say what they have to say. We will not stop the anti-Semitism in the social media at this moment, and what we need most at the moment is encouragement, sympathy, and moral support.
Thank you, Dr. Musikant. Thank you for describing the alarming landscape and also bringing this call for sympathy and empathy forward. Let me now turn to Mr. O'Flaherty to see what the actual data shows us. Fundamental Rights Agency places major importance on the issue of anti-Semitism, regularly collecting data and conducting surveys. In September 2020, FRA published its latest report. Mr. O'Flaherty, could you please tell us what are the main findings, latest trends in this annual overview of anti-Semitic incidents that FRA published last September?
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I'm very grateful to the European Jewish Congress, as well as to the Working Group Against Anti-Semitism. I would like to greet them, as well as the Vice Presidents and the other honourable members of the Parliament and the dear participating colleagues. Let me turn to your question. Yes, we're firmly committed. Let me take Dr. Musikant's last words: courage, sympathy, support. I just want to begin by saying you have the full solidarity of the Fundamental Rights Agency. It is unhesitating and will continue into the future. And I want to assure everybody of that. And I think Dr. Musikant knows that, but it's absolutely unqualified. He described reference to the hearts of Jews. I would refer to Jews at the heart of Europe. And if that heart stops beating, then Europe is lost. So forgive me, it's not your question, but I want to just begin with those words. Now, turning to reports, yes, every year we do an update on the reported incidents of anti-Semitism in the EU. And again, as in the past, it's not good reading. And it's worse because it reports incidents, but it massively understates the incidents. So we're the first to tell you that our report, we stand over the findings, but they are just the tip of the iceberg. Why is that? First, when a country tells you that it has 0 incidents of anti-Semitism, I find that frankly unbelievable, particularly when you consider the extent to which anti-Semitism can be an act committed online. And so I confront the figure 0 with great skepticism. Secondly, even if these figures were not open to such question, we know from our repeated surveys of members of the Jewish community that a significant majority simply never report anti-Semitic incidents. The figure can rise as high as only 1 in 9 incidents is reported. Our report is about reported incidents, so therefore you have to do a multiplier of many times that to get the actual figures. Third, the EU member states are frankly all over the place in terms of methodologies to measure anti-Semitism. In some countries, it's measured when the act constitutes a criminal act. In others, it doesn't need to reach anything like that line. This is a problem. It means that comparable data is extremely hard to produce, and it again limits the utility of reports such as the one I'm describing to you. And finally, we have to draw a conclusion that in some member states, frankly, no effort is made to gather data regarding anti-Semitic acts. That's the first of the 3 dimensions of the report. The second, briefly, is that we have, for the second time this year, assessed the use of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition. And let me reiterate here very clearly, the Fundamental Rights Agency stands with the IRA definition. We find it a very valuable tool which we apply in our work. But to what extent is it being used? We have to tell you that it has only been formally adopted by 14 member states as of May, 14 out of 27. This is, I think, an advocacy agenda, really, to get a 27 out of 27 adoption of the IRA definition. We also need to encourage states to do a better job of showing what adopting the definition means, how that turns into policy. What does that pathway look like? What changes because the definition has been adopted? We found it difficult to find information on that. And the third and final dimension of the report is, for the first time, an attempt by us to map the adoption by EU member states of the plans of action against anti-Semitism, which were called for back in 2018 by the Council of the European Union. This was our first effort to do this. We don't claim that we went into any great depth. What we can tell you is that just 7 member states had, when we gathered the information, had adopted plans of action, just 7. So what is that, a little bit more than a quarter, with 7 more telling us that such plans were in development. So even if you add in the in developments with the ones already in place, we still have just about half the member states. So again, here, an area that could do with increased attention by all of us. So I'll leave it there. I just want to reassure all the participants that we will repeat this exercise every year as one of our contributions to this, this absolutely vital struggle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flaherty. So we take note of the fact that there is a underreporting of incidents. There is some large gaps in data collections. There is still a way to go in the way of implementing the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism and of implementing plans of actions among member states. And we know that although this report focuses mainly on data and developments in 2019, it also includes materials on important manifestation of anti-Semitism that happened during this pandemic. PRA even issued a warning on the explosion of anti-Semitic conspiracy myths during the pandemic. Could you please share with us what you have been observing?
Sure, thank you. We, as many of the participants may know, are following the whole COVID story right across all issues of fundamental rights very closely, and we're publishing periodic public bulletins across the issues. And within this context, we've been detecting right across the member states a rise in anti-Semitism, a rise in the old calumnies that in the context of COVID. And I want to express appreciation right at the outset, before going into detail, appreciation to the Anti-Defamation League and the World Jewish Congress, who did a really good job last spring of waking us up to this problem so that we would pay the proper attention. They woke us up, if you will, to the extent to which online messaging is making the outrageous claims that Jews create, or they spread, or somehow they profit from the virus, and many related equally despicable claims. We're worried that side by side with the growth in such anti-Semitism online, that it's getting harder to police online. Now, Ms. Stump can say more expertly than I about this, but we have observed that the online expression is tending to move away from the relatively well self-policed platforms, the well-known platforms that we all use ourselves, to platforms on the margins of the internet, where this form of self-control and is not so present. This is a matter of great concern. We're also concerned that anti-Semitism is getting smarter, and it is building into its messages elements, words and elements which allow it to fool the content moderation algorithms that many of the principal platforms are using. So we again have to chase this, including through our own understanding of and grasp of how to adjust the application of artificial intelligence. You might ask, what are the languages in which these calumnies are most commonly to be found? And we're grateful to Twitter Analytics, which has pointed out that with regard to anti-Semitism expressed on that platform, the typical languages of its expression are English, French, German, Spanish, and Arabic. So that's what we're watching. We as an agency aren't really playing a role in crafting the policy and legal responses to deal with this, but we're watching, of course, very closely and providing whatever help we can to the European Commission, so that it puts together packages that are adequate to the task. And again, I don't want to anticipate too much what Ms. Stump will say, but I think she's much better placed than me to update this event on where those proceedings are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flaherty, for this comprehensive insights and all the work that FRIES is doing in collecting data on anti-Semitism. Let us indeed move now to policy and political response and turn to Ms. Stump. Ms. Stump, your unit, the unit that you are heading, is in charge of European Commission's social media policy and is responsible for the ongoing project on combating disinformation online. Could you please tell us what the European Commission is doing to counter the proliferation of disinformation, and what are the particular initiatives addressing this phenomenon?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much. Before moving into the particular domain of disinformation, let me also stress from my part that at the European Commission, we are firmly committed to tackling this rise in anti-Semitism, and next year in 2021 we will present a European strategy on anti-Semitism that will complement and support member states' efforts in developing and implementing national strategies to fight anti-Semitism. So that before diving into the particular domain of disinformation. When it comes to disinformation, conspiration theories and so on, hate speech, it appears indeed, as many of you have said, that in these times of uncertainty, these seem to flourish. And the coronavirus pandemic has indeed also seen an important rise in disinformation and in harmful and misleading conspiracy theories, indeed spreading online on various social networks and forms. Indeed, as also explained by other speakers, it seems that this has also led to conspiration theories and accusations related to the Jewish community. So this is indeed also a trend that is concerning in this regard. And these conspiracy theories are very often featuring the very common elements of conspiracy theories, such as secret plots, a scapegoat of a certain group, dividing the world into good and bad. But there are other speakers who may be more equipped to go into that direction. What I would like to explain a little bit today, indeed, is what the European Commission is doing in its policy responses when it comes to disinformation. And first of all, before going into that, I think it's important also to mention that there are very different phenomena out there. So there are conspiracy theories, there is disinformation, there is hate speech. And even if regarding a particular piece of content, it may not be always very straightforward to separate them, it is very important to separate this phenomenon in general, because I mean, when it comes to hate speech, obviously this is illegal content, and there are separate initiatives to address that. My unit is not looking in particular in this regard, but my colleagues at the European Commission, we are also addressing these, for example, on a specific code of conduct on illegal hate speech online. that has been launched in 2016, which is a voluntary initiative, and that is basically having two main pillars, such as effective systems to quickly review hate speech notices by users and remove this content when necessary, and then also mechanisms of cooperation between platforms, IT companies, the civil society organizations, to foster partnerships, also including in areas as awareness raising or education. And when it comes to that, indeed, I think media literacy and raising awareness is a very important tool in this regard. Let me also mention a specific initiative that is related to this. In August, together also with the World Jewish Congress and UNESCO, we have launched a series of accessible and comprehensive visual learning materials that raise awareness of the existence and consequences of conspiracy theories around the COVID-19 pandemic. This particular initiative is basically having resources available for the public to recognize these conspiracy theories, understand what is behind them, refute them with facts, and respond effectively to those who are spreading them. And here there is also a cooperation with platforms, this Twitter, for example, and this is also this campaign, Think Before Sharing, and I think the title says it all. Then moving into the Commission's overarching strategy regarding disinformation, I think this would be important to explain here. This is not a new work strand of the Commission. We have already started with that in 2018. And what I would like to stress is that it has several elements, because there is no magic bullet to address disinformation as such. At least if there is one, we have not found it yet, but we are working with several elements. The key pillars of this strategy is, and again, it's important to stress that this is always in line with freedom of speech, media freedom, and pluralism. As again, disinformation is often an area of not necessarily illegal speech. But we are working with several elements. One of the key elements is the code of practice of disinformation, which is a self-regulatory initiative with the participation of major platforms. These are Facebook, Google, Twitter, Mozilla, Microsoft, TikTok, and obviously we also hope that others may join this initiative also in the future. So basically in this code of practice, the signatories of the code of practice have committed to various actions to fight disinformation. Just to give you a few examples, giving tools to the users that can help them to identify fake news, to also invest in technological measures to prioritize authentic content as opposed to fake content. Also measures regarding the identity and misuse of automated bots, because that is often also an issue that through bots and other mechanisms, fake content is amplified. Also, there are commitments regarding the scrutiny of advertisement placements in order to reduce the revenues related to this information. And it also contains important measures regarding media literacy, empowering users, improving the critical thinking of users. And it is also an important pillar to share data and information with the research community. And when we come to this code, it actually has already shown quite important outcomes when it comes to the COVID-19 crisis. So here we have a monthly monitoring exercise in place where platforms report about what they are doing related to COVID-19 related disinformation. And this is very much often interlinked with the issues and messages can be also among that is to the particular interest of this panel. Here, for example, what have platforms done? For example, they are giving authentic or information panels about the World Health Organization or national health authorities. They demoted content that was fact-checked and proven to be wrong. They have, in particular cases, also removed content that can, for example, directly harm users' health or can affect public safety. So we can already see very concrete results, and certainly this will be not the end of the code of practice. This is rather the beginning of a process, and this process is also complemented with other elements, such as we have set up also a framework that can help fact checkers and researchers to do their job, because this is also a very important part of how we think we can respond to this information. This is the European Digital Media Observatory that is also being set up and will have national hubs that can help on the ground. And last and not least, we have also several initiatives to strengthen media literacy in the EU. Regarding next steps, what will happen in the future, as this is a very important domain, the initiatives regarding this information will be strengthened, and actually very soon, tomorrow, there will be an important policy instrument coming out, the European Democracy Action Plan, that among other instruments will also step up the fight against disinformation. So I encourage you to look into that tomorrow to see what will happen there to even increase the fight. And I think also it's important to mention that still in December, beginning of December, the Commission will also publish the long-awaited Digital Services Act. That is a horizontal initiative regarding the regulation of online platforms, and will also contain elements that can be relevant for the fight against disinformation and hate speech. So I think with all that, you have an overview of the Commission's activities and what we are planning to do in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Tum. Anti-Semitism is often a common element in this disinformation campaigns. And can you please briefly tell us how can we tackle those anti-Semitic conspiracy theories on the internet and ensure synergies with the fight against anti-Semitism?
So basically, as I think I had tried to outline, that we are certainly not in the possession of one particular silver bullet. I think the elements there that could help to fight against disinformation are on several levels. To work together with the platforms, because I think they can be very important and useful partners in this regard. I think empowering users and to make users awareness, initiatives regarding media literacy, also campaigns, publicity campaigns that are showing also the other side of the story are very important. I think that fact-checking and collaboration with fact-checkers and researchers in this area can be very important to shed a little bit also more light into this. So I think it is the empowered consumer and actions targeting the consumer. It is collaboration between platforms, civil society, organizations, member states that can help, and then also have more in-depth picture about the phenomenon with the help of more data, more granular information, and also instruments that can show basically that this content is not corresponding to the facts.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tum, for this report and for your important cross-functional work. Anti-Semitic tropes and conspiracy myths created by disinformation serve as an open door to more extremist views. In the words of Voltaire, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. And at this point, I would like to pass the baton to my colleague Yohanan Seinaf to continue our webinar.
Thank you, Maria. And in this period, I would like to turn to Mr. Ahmed Mansour for the psychological perspective. No? Mr. Mansour?
Ja, ich bin da.
Ah.
Hallo.
Yes, I am present. Can you hear me?
Yes. Well, it's the Mine Prevention Initiative, which you founded in 2017, focuses on countering Muslim extremism and anti-Semitism. You have also dealt with radicalization as a family counselor at Hayat Deutschland in Berlin. What is the effect of disinformation and conspiracy myths on radicalization of young people? And what can we do to prevent this?
Also erstmal vielen herzlichen Dank.
First of all, thank you very much for having invited me. Shalom and salam. It is an honor being present. I apologize for speaking German, but I have to admit that my English is a little bit too limited to express what I want to express. I speak to you as a practitioner, but also as a former anti-Semite. That was my background. That's how I grew up. And I speak to you as a Democrat who is worried, very worried, when he thinks of Germany and when he thinks of Europe, because every day we see more and more problems due to anti-Semitism. And my appeal is that you all think long-term and look back long-term. These are not recent phenomena, just terror attacks in recent years, be they Islamistic attacks or far-right attacks. We often will notice that it's primarily Jewish locations, Copenhagen, Brussels, Paris, Halle, Vienna, Jewish targets. Anti-Semitism is part of any radical grouping. It is quite interesting in the work I do when you look at far left radicalism, far right radicalism, and anti-Semitic movements. They share one narrative. They have the same enemy. That is the Jew for them. So we have here a horizontal theme that unites. It's not just in one extremist ideology that you find this. And a lot of that has moved more towards the center of our societies. It's not a recent phenomenon. In times of crisis, when it's tough, in times when people look for an alternative solution, when they want to put the responsibility on someone else's shoulder, then people often go back to old ideas who the enemy is. It's the Jews, they want to rule the world, etc. So nothing of that is really new. After the 11th of September, it became very obvious. There was a very aggressive atmosphere in many European cities during 2014, during the Gaza war. After the attacks in Paris in 2015, there were conspiracy theories pointing fingers at Jews or Israel. So it's not a new phenomenon. If it's about finding a solution, it will not be sufficient to get acting only after something has happened. It has to be a different approach. We need to do something at 3 levels. The most important levels is the following, and the speakers before me already mentioned it: education, education, education. Schools today, and I think now of the German schools, is not equipped to tackle the challenges of our times. The schools we have now might be very good in saying something on the historical responsibility of Germany with regard to Holocaust, but that is not sufficient. The schools cannot react to conspiracy theories, cannot react to the Middle East conflict. Here, the schools do not invite to reflection. We need a change of the curricular subject that is more contemporary, dealing with this field. We need also media skills, media literacy. Young people, pupils, need to be able to differentiate between fake news and facts, and what is a theory and what is a scientific fact. And we need narratives that counter the existing wrong narratives. The radical movements, be they in the Islamistic field, in the far left or far right field, produce more products and offer them to target groups than democratic groups. Where are our offensive offerings, so to say? Where are our concepts to have something we can pass on and show and offer? That must be more. That must be more visible as well. And an appeal to the political decision makers, including the EU. It's not sufficient to limit oneself to a symbolism in politics. The Jewish people I meet and am aware of, they don't need more memorial events. What they need are concepts. What is needed is that the European Union is very wise in choosing its partners. It's not a financial issue. I think that in many European countries, there's an understanding of what we are doing. But when it's about selecting partners, when it's about selecting projects, there have been mistakes made so that funds went into the wrong hands. And now the Muslim dimension. I repeat, anti-Semitism covers many fields and groups, but since 2015, we have a large number of people who entered Europe who have a different societal and social background. They did not grow up in a democratic system. If you look at the systems in Iraq or Afghanistan, then you will be aware of one thing. In the school systems, anti-Semitism is an integral part. I watched the TV programs and I'm aware of the level of anti-Semitism you may find. And here we need offers. Here we need integration processes that tackle anti-Semitism as an essential element to tackle. If someone wants to come to Europe and live in Europe, we welcome them. But it needs to go hand in hand with the understanding anti-Semitism has no place in Europe. That needs to be communicated very clearly. And finally, we need also a stronger legislation. This must also help to bring about this message that Europe will not, cannot, shall not tolerate anti-Semitism.
Thank you, Mr. Mansour, for identifying the core issues and particularly signaling that awareness of this information is one of the main factors, one of the main mechanics driving radicalization. In your writings, and in particular in your latest book, Solidarisch Sein, you emphasize the importance of solidarity and direct contact in the radicalization work. How do we manage this at a time when we're all online and isolated from each other?
As I said, a lot can happen online by offering counter narratives and by giving offers to target groups. For example, I see very little in the Arabic or in the Farsi languages that would offer information. And that's a significant problem we had in Germany with migrants, independently of anti-Semitism, by the way. The rules, the measures were communicated in the German language, but the target group of refugees did not understand German. So you need to offer the information in the right language. And these people attend our schools, they work in our companies, they are members of integration courses, and they're in other offline contexts. So the offline context also has to be seen because you need to use the online content to prepare them, generally speaking, to create media literacy, that they understand what is fake news, what is not fake. Yes, we became more digital, but our schools are lagging behind. There are precious few offers that help people to really be literate with the online offer.
May I ask a question, Johanan? Is it possible? Yes. Yes, thank you very much. I think you had a really important point there, Mr. Mansour, and because we have offline and online hatred, anti-Semitism, hate speech. What do you think in comparison on the street, radicalization on the street, in the streets, and radicalization in the internet? Is this the same phenomenon or are there differences? How is this interrelated and how can we fight against it?
Also vielen Dank, Frau Beer. Sie haben das auch sehr, sehr...
Thank you very much, Mrs. Beer. You stated it quite correctly. It happens both ways, offline and online. I can look at biographies of the terrorists of recent years, and I noticed the following. They have a certain information contact that happened online, but they always moved offline as well. There are hardly people who had their radicalization happening only in the online context and then they joined IS. There is always an offline dimension and we must not forget it. But if we come with online offers, we will already reach many before they start their offline contacts. This is the year 2020. We have social workers, but why don't we have digital social workers? Why do we wait until a young person comes to a community or youth center? Usually there are few people there and now they are even closed, these centers. But these are young people who spend at least 4 hours each day online. They consume WhatsApp, TikTok, Instagram, etc., etc. These are the channels where we must come up with more offers. Why isn't it happening? Why don't we advertise for our democracy? Why do we leave that field very much to the conspiracy theories, etc.?
Thank you, Mr. Mansour, for your valuable insights, your important work and dedication in this very challenging field. At this point, I would like to open the floor to any questions and reflections from our panelists and hosts. Dr. Ariel Musikant?
Well, I can only thank Mr. Mansour and Michael O'Flaherty for what they have been saying. And I have 3 questions to you. One, the issue of the IRA definition. We have been really fighting and we haven't succeeded. We have 50% of EU countries who have not dealt with it, and we have 50% who have accepted it, but only 7 who have really started with the plans of actions. What can the European Commission, what can the European Parliament do to help us get this further? One thing. Second question. I'm also responsible for securities in Jewish communities, and let me tell you, we have raised the level of security in the last week to the highest. We are expecting terror attacks against Jewish communities in the next couple of weeks after what happened in Iran. My question to the European Parliament is, how is it acceptable that threats against Jewish communities in Europe and in the world, don't forget the 2 bloodiest attacks were done in Buenos Aires against the AMIA and in Burgas in Bulgaria against a group of tourists. These things are happening, they happened, and there are threats that they will happen again. And I'm hearing that in a couple of weeks and months, there are going to be negotiations with Iran to re-implement the JCPOA and all the issues on atomic energy, but nobody is speaking on the threats against the Jews and the anti-Semitism coming out of Iran, the issue of, and that's my third question, of denying the Holocaust coming out of Iran. Yes, there are condemnations by states of governments, heads of Europe, but they are negotiating with Iran as if all this wouldn't exist. So how can a Jewish community, let's say in Austria, Germany, or France, live with the fact that the security level is to be risen to top level in the next months out of fear of attacks? And at the same time, Europeans will start negotiating with Iran as if nothing happens. This is exactly the illogical situation we are facing. The politicians are talking about the IRA definition, and 50% of the countries don't even care. There's a discrepancy between what the elite wants and what is happening on the ground in all these issues. And my question really is, how can we change that?
Just to answer very briefly.
I think I can give an answer in my remarks on the end.
Okay.
Yes, please, Dr. Markov. Mr. Vlad.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I was looking for the unmute button. I just want to respond to some of the remarks from Dr. Musikant. I can obviously say nothing about Iran because our mandate is exclusively internal to look at EU member states. But I would just recall that there is a working group of the Commission on the implementation of the Council Declaration, and that working group clearly has an important role to play in encouraging member states with regard not only to adopting the IRA definition, but giving that some content and meaning. And so I think that working group is an obvious place to put such questions. The Fundamental Rights Agency will continue on an annual basis to report on the take-up of the definition and the putting in place of the action plans. I think we also need to put these questions directly to IRA itself, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which clearly would need to play a leading role in this and in all sorts of related issues that Mr. Mansour has spoken to. And we at the Fundamental Rights Agency, within the limits of our own mandate and capacity, I think more importantly, it's not a mandate issue, it's a capacity issue, we'll do what we can to support IRA and to support other initiatives to promote the use of the definition, to promote the adoption and the implementation of meaningful action plans.
And maybe I can add something to the Iran question. Because I think you're totally right. I know that the European External Service is already with the Stratcom East task force on the subject, but I think, and I already called for it, that they have to work more on the Iran case to just show up what is happening and to also take it in the negotiations. To be stronger there, because this cannot be splitted and divided if we are talking on the diplomatic field with such a country. And there, I hope that we can also work together, being stronger when it comes by giving money to other countries, third countries. I mean, I think it was Mr. Mansour who mentioned it. That when EU funds are given, for example, for education, as we see it in Palestine, so we have really to watch out that the books, that the material used is not anti-Semitic. And so there is a large field to work on it. and it has to be part of the negotiation of those funds, that we do not serve anti-Semitic education systems, but try to change such socialization as you described this, Mr. Mansour, from your childhood.
Thank you, Ms. Wehr, for these important thoughts. As we come to an end, I would like to pass the floor to our host, MEP Dr. Almar Karas, Vice President of the European Parliament and Vice Chair of the Working Group Against Antisemitism, to share his reflections on our discussion today.
Ja, meine Damen und Herren, ich darf mich zuerst einmal ganz
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for this hour. Well, I'm often a little bit burdened when I have to state that it's not by law that you will be able to end antisemitism. Sanctions alone will not prevent antisemitism either. Because that is the case, I say that on an ongoing basis, we have to face the issue. We heard it. Anti-Semitism is visible in a diversity of phenomena. It's not just the well-known phenomena, but also with new phenomena like the algorithms. In his first statement, Mr. Musikant summarized it very beautifully, the end of his statement. What do we, the Jewish citizens, need? It is encouragement, sympathy, and support, and empathy. That alone will not suffice. We need the one thing for the Jewish people, and we need the public conscience of all others with regard to the causes and the consequences coming along with the various aspects of anti-Semitism we find now in our societies. Mr. Musikant, I remember very well, we met a year ago, and you told me the following. The combat against anti-Semitism starts with defending democracy, with defending parliamentary democracy. And here we have our link. In society, we see wrong developments, authoritarianism, nationalism, pointing fingers at a certain group, radicalization in the language, polarizing effects, black-white images. In politics are always a breeding ground for anti-Semitism as well. And here we have some 40 developments. And some are open to using this because they think this wins me votes. But the same people may not know the price to pay or are not willing to factor that price in. So that the end justifies the means for them. And because that is a fact, I heard a very important aspect mentioned during this debate. It's raising awareness also for ourselves. It's not just a single question, this is wrong, this is right. This we have to condemn, and this we have to applaud. It's also about the following. There is a political responsibility in our society to make certain that we look at the cause and the impact of anti-Semitism with a historical view, but also with a view to the future. We really have to tackle this issue. And the question was also, what can the European Parliament do? Please understand one thing. Do not expect that every member of the European Parliament is aware of the figures you gave with regard to the definition and the action plans, to make it visible, to bring it out into the public, that some are not following the rules, that some are not honoring commitments, even within the EU, is an important factor to acknowledge. And I would say it's not even only about not having any discourse with Iran. The question is, what is an element in our discourse with Iran? A sharper awareness in European politics is needed to understand what are the security concerns of Israel and what has been developing, especially due to the behavior of Iran. We have to be aware of that when we talk to Iran. And if you find an agreement on topics without these elements in the discourse, namely the security needs of Israel in this context, and what will we agree on if there is an agreement? Here, the European Parliament can exert pressure and can speak up, calling a spade a spade. In 2018, the Council entered into a commitment that at the time of Austrian Council presidency, we should do everything to guarantee the security of Jewish communities. That is a starting point we have to keep. Otherwise, you forget what it's all about. And this is something where I wonder if in the European Parliament and other parliaments, this understanding, is it a fact? Nicola, you know this. We know the colleagues in the working group on anti-Semitism, and what this working group has done. For example, since 2017, we have this particular topical resolution dealing exclusively with anti-Semitism and how to combat it. So we have something, and we should not just put it in the drawer now. We should use it and work with it. We have decisions we have made in the past. And I would say every new parliamentarian should be given this as part of a welcome package in order to have the awareness and the knowledge what is already there and what should be the foundation of what they do as well. Because there are new parliamentarians who may not know this. And yes, Mr. Musikant, you also touched on the following. Exactly a month ago, we had the attack in Vienna. We hear about its background, maybe not prima facie anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish attack, but it was happening in front of the synagogue in Vienna, after all. And here I'm aware that the information is often incomplete, the information that comes across. Yes, we had a European information exchange. That did happen, but what did you do with the information? And what about psychological support for those impacted? That was a weaker element. Radicalization, disinformation, conspiracy theories, the hate and the disinformation we observe more and more in the internet. So there is no lack of topics. We heard about recent elements to combat anti-Semitism. and some measures hopefully will have a good impact. For example, we need transparency and accountability in the online context. And here Austria and Germany have taken a lead. The responsible ministers in Austria found very clear words recently with regard to the measures planned. And Mrs. Trump also mentioned that soon there will be further proposals from the European Commission, Digital Services Act, for example. We need here a plethora, whole bouquet of measures in order to counter anti-Semitism, schools, psychology, the media, politicians, all groups were mentioned. As I said, online transparency, online accountability is needed. And we definitely have to keep going with sharpening and raising awareness with regard to what's happening, because disinformation has become a threat to our democratic societies. In particular, it means that anti-Semitic conspiracy theories have to get our attention. We must not shrug our shoulders. We really have to be very active in combating these. We have to do more in order to understand the mechanisms that lead to radicalization. How does it happen in networks? How do they do this? And we need to target them with the full force of the law. We have to tackle the problem of radicalization in the younger generation, which means we have to be serious about de-radicalization of us. And I want to end with a positive remark. I'm very, very happy to see that the institutions of the European Union join forces in combating anti-Semitism, join forces in protecting Jewish life. What we must not do, what must not happen is go back to the daily agenda as usual. In other words, we must be part of those who have a public debate on anti-Semitism and what comes along with it. I too often deplore the fact that anti-Semitism and how to counter it is rather a niche interest, a little bit on the sidelines. It should be much more central in what we do, in how we approach things, how we shape our instruments. And we have instruments, and they are not used sufficiently. So I appeal here to politicians. When a politician speaks, when he points fingers, when it's just Manichaeism, black and white, that has to be understood that that is not the right way to do it. And dear Nicola Beer and dear members of the working group on anti-Semitism, be assured that we will continue with this understanding.
Thank you.
If I may, unfortunately, we run out of time. Thank you for the passionate webinar. I feel frustrated that we have to stop now because I think that there are so many things that we could continue to discuss. I want to thank the incredible interpreter that we had with us today. Just I give her name, Martina Wallace. I think that we know already whom we asked to do interpretation next time because she was extraordinary. Thanks to our hosts. Thanks to Nicola and Dr. Karas. With friends like you, I'm sure that people that are listening to us today have much more hope now, and not only people from the Jewish community, for all people who are here to fight for democracy, for our rights to normal and just Europe. So for me, it was a great joy to listen to you both and to our fantastic panelists. And I have a special thank you to Ahmad Mansour. You are just outstanding. And your words was today, I'm sure that it went directly to our minds, to our hearts. Thank you so much. Thank you to all panelists. And I will have to say goodbye, but we will meet again, I hope, very soon to continue our important mission and our important discussions. And I'm really looking forward to see what the declaration of the German presidency will look like. I think that things are happening maybe even now or late in the evening. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you. Bye.